Hello and welcome to the Follow in Truth Bible study on YouTube. As always, I'm your host, LJ. Thank you very much for joining me today. Today's video, we're going to be looking at a topic that I've investigated in the past, but I thought that it'd be a bit of a break from doing the Catholic arguments that I've been doing, although in a sense this could be classified as an argument against the Catholic Church in a sense. What day did Jesus die? So the traditional being understanding being Friday, so which obviously the Catholic Church would postulate. It's not just the Catholic Church, though, on this one. I would say that the vast majority of Christianity also accepts that Jesus died on the Friday. Now, for me, it's not something that I would say is important in the sense that I don't think is a salvation issue. But what I would say is that I think that it is important to be able to figure out what day Jesus died in order to have kind of like a more firm belief in the Bible and what it actually states. Now, it is something that gets used against Christianity, that there are errors in the Bible, and one of those errors being the fact that the fact that you can't get 3 days and 3 nights within the what am I trying to say? You can't get 3 days, 3 nights in Friday to Sunday, basically. So that's the tradition is Friday to Sunday. So it's most commonly believed, or it's at least accepted, unquestioned, in much of the Christian world, that Jesus died on a Friday, also known as Good Friday, and that he rose again on Sunday, which most people know as Easter Sunday. However, that, I think, clearly creates some problems with the Bible and what and what Jesus actually states himself. Those who do not simply follow what is commonly believed, or they do question church tradition, can see the obvious flaw in that tradition. And it's like I say, it's many atheists and Muslims use this argument against the Bible and highlight that the Bible very clearly has mistakes within the biblical narrative, and they actually use this against Christianity. So we're going to look specifically at some of the things that that are used against this tradition, and obviously what the actual Bible says itself. So Jesus himself literally states that he would spend 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So, as I say, we're going to be looking at what day did Jesus die here: Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. I'm going to be arguing specifically for Thursday in this argument. Now, I do understand that Wednesday has its supporters, and we're going to look at some of the arguments that they put forward in order to support Wednesday. And I can see some of the arguments myself why Wednesday could possibly be the day. And then obviously the tradition is Friday. And then we're going to look at the the arguments and the evidence for Friday, and why I don't think that either one of those days actually fits the biblical narrative. And I'm not just talking about one verse or what Luke says or what Matthew says. We have to harmonize all four gospels. Now, all four gospels record different things, and you have to be able to harmonize all four. One doesn't take precedent over the other. There is information that can be extracted from all four gospels that will help us in working out exactly what day Jesus actually died on. And we cannot ignore the scriptures from all of these four gospels. And we can't just say, well, okay, we're going to take this verse as being our priority verse. And if it doesn't align with the other three gospels. So you have to be able to work with all four gospels on this. So when it comes to, like I say, we're going to look at all three of these days, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And to me, Thursday is the only day that can actually fit all three scripture, all four gospels, when we actually look at the full information of and the detailed information that we get from all four. So what we need to know is specifically that Jesus literally states, "For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." So we do get this specific statement by Jesus that is a statement that he would be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, this is a very clear reference to the story found in the book of Jonah. Now, but this, why have I not got the book of Jonah up? I'm not going to go to Jonah right now, but it's very. I'll go to that in a moment. I've got that verse in a moment. But it is a very clear attestation to the book of Jonah. But in fact, Jesus states that the sign of Jonah would be the only sign that would be given to that wicked and adulterous generation. Right? So this is going to be the only sign that is given, the sign of Jonah. So just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, Jesus is going to be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And this is going to be the sign that is given. Now, this was in direct reference or response to the scribes and Pharisees that had asked him for a sign. Then certain of the scribes and the Pharisees answered, saying, "Master, we would see a sign from thee." So a sign was often asked for proof of what a prophet was saying or what somebody was saying. They would ask for a sign in order, what sign can you give us to prove this to us, that what you are saying is the truth and basically is from God. And Jesus says that to this wicked generation, the only sign that will be given is this sign of Jonah. But we have an error. Friday to Sunday does not equate to 3 days and 3 nights. If Jesus said that he would be in the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, but he died on a Friday and rose on a Sunday, either Jesus, the Bible, or the tradition is wrong, or we've misunderstood what 3 days and 3 nights means. But I should give you a clue. It isn't Jesus or the Bible that is wrong. So it's either the tradition or our understanding of what this 3 days and 3 nights is. It is impossible to get 3 days and 3 nights into Friday through Sunday. It's just impossible. It is taught that Jesus rose Sunday morning. No matter how much you want to believe the church tradition, it simply has to be accepted without question for this to be correct. Now, anyone who does question it can see that there are not 3 days and 3 nights between Friday and Sunday morning. That's not 2,000 years ago, and it's not today. Friday to Sunday is at its best 3 days and 2 nights. Unless, of course, we say that Jesus rose in the evening of what would be Sunday, using today's modern calendar. However, this would cause major problems with the texts that say that Jesus rose long before the evening of the first day of the week. Now, some may argue, and in fact that they do argue, that Jesus did not mean that he was going to be dead literally for 3 days and 3 nights, and that it only actually referred to the 3rd day. Now, Catholic.com state Jesus died on Good Friday and was resurrected on Easter Sunday. The Creed does not say that Jesus was raised 3 days later. It says that Jesus rose on the 3rd day. So counting Friday, the 1st, he died, the day he died, as the 1st day, and Saturday as the 2nd, that means the 3rd day is Sunday, which is technically true. So if you're only saying that we're referring to 3 days and you're ignoring the 3 nights, then it is possible to get that into Friday to Sunday. Now, the Catholic.com on another article that they wrote that is on their website state the expression 3 days and 3 nights could be used as simply a slightly hyperbolic way of referring to 3 days. So they claim that it could just be 3 days and 3 nights could just be 3 days. And so that's what the Catholic websites argue for, is that actually 3 days and 3 nights do not mean 3 days and 3 nights. It just means 3 days, or the 3rd day. Now, we do see a number of references to the 3rd day in Scripture, specifically referring to Jesus's resurrection. Luke 24:7. So when Jesus met the 2 disciples on the way to Emmaus, after he had risen, they stated that saying, "The Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and the 3rd day rise again." So we have a reference to 3rd day. Now we see that that some of the Pharisees were worried that someone would steal the body and of Jesus and pretend that Jesus had risen, because even they knew that Jesus had said that he would rise again on the 3rd day. Now, the next day that followed, the day of the preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, "Sir, we remember that this deceiver said, while he was yet alive, after 3 days I will rise again." Now, we do know that Jesus had said that he would rise again after 3 days when he referred to the temple. John 2:19, Jesus, and we heard him, I will destroy this temple. This is what Jesus said. We heard him, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. This is, again, Jesus had stated, Jesus answered and said unto them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Now, Jesus also stated that he must be rejected and raised the 3rd day. Saying, the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be slain, and be raised the 3rd day. All right, so I'm going to remove these comments because Lion Farm, I'm sorry, but you're not going to, I'm not just going to have like somebody come in and spam my chat. Sorry about that, but I'm just not going to have somebody come in and spam the chat without interacting. So Matthew 17:22. And while they abode in Galilee, Jesus said unto them, the Son of Man shall be betrayed into the hands of men, and they shall kill him. And the 3rd day he shall be raised again. And they were exceeding sorry. Mark 8:31. For he taught his disciples and said unto them, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of men, and they shall kill him, and after that he is killed, he shall rise the 3rd day. For he taught his disciples, this is Mark 9:31, for he taught his disciples and said unto them, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of men, and they shall kill him, and after that he is killed, he shall rise the 3rd day. Actually, I think I just read that one. That was the one I didn't read. I just read Mark. I've got this all mixed up on my writing, it looks like. Anyway, doesn't matter. Mark 10:34. And they shall mock him, and they shall scourge him, and shall spit upon him, and shall kill him, and the 3rd day he shall rise again. So we have the clear attestation to the 3rd day. However, this sign that Jesus referred to was the only sign that Jesus said would be given. In his reference to 3 days, he explicitly stated that he must be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. So Matthew 12:40 literally states there that the Son of Man shall be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Not just 3 days. There's an explicit reference to 3 nights here. So if we accept that Jesus did say that he would be dead for 3 days, which it would seem that most are going to be in agreement for, it would be wrong to ignore the fact that he also clearly states 3 nights. So we have to ask why, if you're going to accept the 3 days, why we wouldn't also accept the reference to 3 nights. Now, when we go back and we look at the story of Jonah in the belly of the whale, or the fish, we will clearly see that it does state 3 days and 3 nights. So Jonah 1:17. Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. So Jesus directly references the story of Jonah as a time frame. The story of Jonah includes both days and nights. It doesn't just include days. And this is the direct reference that Jesus is using as his sign. Right? This is the sign that he used. So if Jesus is using the sign of 3 days and 3 nights, which he stated, which the Pharisees would have been fully aware of because they would have known Jonah 1:17, but they wouldn't have known Jonah 1:17, the verse, because obviously the verses weren't there at the time, but they would have known this story, and they would have known that it was 3 days and 3 nights in Jonah. Now, the Bible has many clear references to days and nights. So in Genesis 7:4, for instance, for yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made, I will destroy from off the face of the earth. Genesis 7:2, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In Exodus 24:18, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And then we have some more there. And so Exodus 34:28, and he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He did neither eat bread nor drink water, and he wrote upon the table the words of the covenant and the 10 commandments. So, and we have some more as well, where it refers to in that top one there, we have 3 days and 3 nights in 1 Samuel 3:12, in Job 2:13. We have 7 days and 7 nights, and then in Matthew 4:2, we also have 40 days and 40 nights. So the Bible clearly does reference days and nights, right? And they are included in the same sentence, in the same verse, days and nights. 40 days, 40 nights. 3 days, 3 nights. But when we look at these occurrences, what you'll see, what it seems like in each one of these occurrences, it seems to be what is being referenced is a clear time frame from when the action started to when it stopped, and that it was continuous for that set period of time. The action, which is being stated in each of these verses, doesn't stop at nighttime. It continues on during the night. So it's day and night. So it's a continual action, day and night action, something that happens for the full period of this time. The rain was on the earth for the full amount of 40 days and 40 nights. It didn't only rain at day, or it didn't only rain at night. It rained both day and night, and the action was continuous. So we have a continuous action in the reference to days and nights. So when Jesus said that he would be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, it's a reference there to a continuation of 3 days and 3 nights. He wasn't going to come out of the tomb during the night. It was the continuation. And so the continuation is for 3 days and 3 nights. That's the full amount of time. That's the time frame. Now, there are many other biblical attestations to just days. All right, so we have days, or 3 days in specifically, that don't include the nights, such as Genesis. Genesis 30:36, and he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fled from the rest of Laban's flocks, or it fed the rest of Laban's flocks. So this was something 3 days' journey. But on a 3 days' journey, what you do is you journey for the day, then you set up camp for the night, then you stop, and then you continue on the next day. So it's 3 days' journey. It's not 3 days and 3 nights journey, because you're not journeying for the 3 days, 3 nights. So when it's only referring to something that is a day, it only includes the day. It doesn't include the night. Such as in Genesis 40:13, the next one. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head. All right. And then in Exodus 3:8, and they shall hearken to the voice, and thou shalt come, thou and thy elders, up unto the king of Egypt, and ye shall say unto him, the Lord God of the Hebrews hath met us now. Let us go beseech thee 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord. Exodus 10:22, and Moses stretched forth his hand towards heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. So it seems like that, while not specifically, the 3 days, when it's not included in the night, kind of gives an indication that the time frame isn't specifically like the full of, it's not a set period of time. So 3 days journey is not literally a set period of time, because it's not including the full 3 days and 3 nights, not including the full time. It's just how far they could march or walk in a set day. And so it doesn't seem like this is something that is continuous, or doesn't have to be continuous for those for that set period of time that is being included in these verses. Now we also see that Matthew himself uses 3 days. Matthew 15:32. Then Jesus called his disciples unto him, and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they continue with me now 3 days. So this multitude had been with Jesus for 3 days. Now it's unlikely that he's referring to the nights. Maybe they were there, but maybe, obviously they're likely to be asleep, and so he's not referring to that in specific. It's just that he's saying for these 3 days that they were with me. And that they've had nothing to eat for that time. But it doesn't necessitate that that's what it's meaning. It just, sometimes we do see 3 days, and we are referring to 3 days. But when we see the 3 days and 3 nights, it seems like that it is specifically saying that this is a continual thing that is happening for those 3 days and the nights. And we also have some other attestation, biblical references to just 3 days as well. And in fact, there are over 40 references to just 3 days in the Bible. So we get when it's just specifically 3 days, we get 40 references to the 3 days in the Bible. So those that do ignore the information regarding the 3 nights are doing so contrary to the clear biblical references that include the 3 nights. So if you're ignoring them, you're ignoring the fact that the Bible does refer to days and nights, and that it distinguishes between days and nights. So there is a distinction there. So to me, anyway, I'm not into everybody. It may not seem important to everybody, but to me, it would seem that the 3 nights are important. They are included information to give a specific time frame, but it also highlights the continuality of the action that is happening in those verses. Now, those same disciples that we saw on the road that Jesus met up with, they were clearly waiting for the third day. And it would seem, anyway, that they were a bit disillusioned as to why he had not yet risen from the dead. Because obviously they didn't recognize him at the time. They didn't know that this was Jesus. They didn't know that Jesus had yet risen. And they were a bit disillusioned by it. But they were like, but we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. So they were saying, well, we believe that this was the Messiah, but beside all of this, today is the third day since these things were done. And they were, well, he hasn't risen, and yet he was meant to have risen on the third day. That was what he told us, that he was going to rise on the third day. Now, in opposition to the Friday crucifixion, so we do get this obviously clear attestation to the third day. In opposition to the Friday crucifixion, many offer Wednesday as an alternative and, in fact, the correct day on which Jesus actually died. They will say that Wednesday is the correct day. And you may have seen this before. This is a detailed depiction that kind of argues that Jesus died on a Wednesday and that he rose again on the, well, they have it in this, they have it that he rose again on the Sabbath, on the Saturday, on the day part of the weekly Sabbath. The problem with that is that you now have Jesus rising on the Sabbath. Now, it's not the Saturday that's the issue. It's the Sabbath that I would have issue with. And I don't believe that that can be supported by Scripture. Now, we're going to look into this a little bit more detail in a moment. But the Wednesday dying is fine. If it was Wednesday, I'd be okay with that. The problem I have is with the Sabbath rising, because it doesn't align with Scripture. And the fact is that what they've tried to do here is make 72 hours, specifically exactly 72 hours, so that Jesus was dead and buried for literally 72 hours, 3 days and 3 nights. And by doing so, they've put the death as Wednesday, and now they have him rising on the Sabbath. Now, like I say, this is quite detailed, and we're going to look into this a little bit more as we go on. But I'm going to try and, I think I'm going to show that this Saturday, this Sabbath rising is not possible. That he couldn't have risen at this time, and that the Scripture actually proves that he didn't rise then. And if you don't have that resurrection there, but you do have the death, the crucifixion on the Wednesday, you're going to get more than what they've tried to assert in this image. You're actually going to go over the 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb. And so what I'll show is that this cannot work, and I'll show why it doesn't work as well. Now, in order to ascertain what is the correct day and which is wrong, whether Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, we need verses. We need clear verses. We need starting points, and we need evidence from the Bible in order to support what the Bible says. Now, we can go by the tradition and we can go by arguments. And if you go by certain different early church fathers, there's not really a huge amount of argument over this, because there's not really much talk about what day he actually died. But you can get arguments for Saturday, Friday, and Wednesday. But we're going to go by what the Bible states, because that's the important part here, is what does the Bible say? So we need to find verses, and we need the verses, and we need the evidence for those verses. So when we look at the biblical accounts, we do have this verse that specifically tells us when he rose. Now, when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. So he rose early the first day of the week. So that is a specific statement of when he rose. The first day of the week is what we call Sunday, although it's technically it's Friday, Saturday, the past sundown is when the first day of the week would start. All right. So when we go back to this, what you would have is the Sunday, it starts with the evening, because evening, it starts on the evening of the Saturday, because the Jewish day is evening and nighttime. It doesn't run the same as what we now have starting at 12 o'clock. You'd be looking at roughly around about 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. is the start and finish of a day. So the Saturday, it would have finished, the Sabbath would have finished at 6 p.m. All right. And then the next day would have been the Sunday, would have started basically the next day, the first day of the week. The problem with that is that we have the resurrection happening early the first day of the week. So it can't be where they've put that there in the Sabbath. It would have to move from the sun, from where they have it in the day part of Saturday, it would have to be on the evening part of Saturday. So you're now moving the resurrection from the Saturday Sabbath to the first day of the week, which would still be technically our Saturday, but it would now be past 6 p.m. So it's now the evening part. But now you don't have 72 literal hours. You've had to move this one step over. And I'll show you this in a bit more detail a bit further on. So we know that Jesus was risen early the first day of the week. So early the first day of the week can only be after the Sabbath has finished. Because the Sabbath is the 7th day. The first day of the week is the start of the next day. If he rose early the first day of the week, he can't have risen on the Sabbath. The Sabbath day does not work. So if it was a Wednesday, we now are we're starting to run into problems. Now, early is the Greek word proi, and it means dawn, morning, dawn. So it's clearly at the dawning part of the first day of the week. So that would be at sunrise on what we would call Sunday. So it's at the kind of the sunrise, the dawn on that first day of the week. So this now causes even more problems for Jesus having risen. If he died on the Wednesday, this would cause a problem with his resurrection on what they would then have to have it as being the Sabbath. He clearly cannot have risen with these two verses, with Mark 16:9, he cannot have risen on the Sabbath. He rose on the first day of the week. And proi, which is early, the first day of the week, proi is translated as early, means dawn. So it means now when Jesus was risen at dawn, the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he cast 7 devils. So that just does not work on a Wednesday Sabbath timeline. Now, when we go back to the beginning of Mark, we will see that we get even more information, which supports the rising in the morning of the first day of the week. So when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome had brought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. The Sabbath has now passed. So it was clearly after the Sabbath has passed that these have come to anoint Jesus. So, and as I say, that would mean that it was past 6 p.m. on what we would classify as Saturday. So although it would still be a Saturday, it would now be the evening part of the Saturday, not the daylight part of Saturday. It cannot be that daylight part of Saturday, right? Because that is the Sabbath. But Jesus didn't die on the Sabbath. He resurrected. He didn't resurrect on the Sabbath. He resurrected early, proi, at dawn, the first day of the week. So, the Jewish Sabbath being was Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. So anything after the sundown is no longer the Sabbath on the Saturday. And very early, the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. So we see all of this reference point of the rising of the sun on the first day of the week, when it clearly states in verse, when Jesus had risen at the dawn, at the rising of the sun. And then we get this more information of when the women came to anoint him. So we must understand and not confuse the Jewish calendar and the modern calendar. We have to understand the differences between those. And it seems like major misunderstandings of what actually happens when we don't do that. And that's why we get this Friday to Sunday. Now, this rising is also echoed in Matthew, or when they come to the sepulchre. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, so it's the dawn, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And it's also in Luke as well. Now upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came unto the sepulchre, bringing the spices which they had prepared, and certain others with them. And they found the stone rolled away from the sepulchre. And also in John, the first day of the week, cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. So she was coming at the dark, early, at the rising of the sun. So it's the sun is starting to rise. But before the sun rises, it's dark. Then the sun rises, and you get your light. So this is all clearly referencing the same point. All four Gospels support this. Now, there is a claim that Jesus did not rise on the first day of the week, as we've already seen, but actually the Sabbath day. And this is only really supported by those that have to postulate this Wednesday death, the crucifixion being on the Wednesday, because they want to work with the 72 hours, the literal 72 hours. They can only get that to work that he died, that he resurrected on the Sabbath if he died on the Wednesday. But obviously that then causes a problem with where we're clearly told the resurrection actually happened. It's clearly contrary to what the biblical attestation of the gospel state. Now, let's have a look. When we see the first day of the week, actually, what you'll see is that it doesn't say, the translation, the first day of the week, actually comes from the Greek Sabbath. So this is the understanding, and I can see the mistake that they're making, but the first day of the week is not translated from the Greek first day of the week. It's translated from the Greek Sabbaths, right? And there are, in Matthew, you'll see that this is the Greek Sabbaths. In the red, they are Sabbaths. So when it says in Matthew, where do we find Matthew there? 28:1, in the end of the Sabbath, right? So that was the first Sabbath. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the Sabbaths of the week, right? We've translated it as first. It's translated in the King James Version as first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene. Now that causes confusion. Why does the English say first day of the week when the Greek says Sabbaths? Surely then that should be translated as it began to dawn towards the first Sabbath. No, it shouldn't, and we'll see why. And this is fundamental to understanding this this timeline. The Greek here states Sabbaths. As you'll see there, it's plural, Sabbaths. It doesn't say Sabbath. It says Sabbaths, plural. It's Sabbaton, right? It's plural. It's referring to two or more. So it's not just a singular Sabbath. So it's not referring to the Sabbath. It is not referring to one specific Sabbath. And it's not referring to the weekly Sabbath. The Jews called the first day of the week the first day of the Sabbath. That was what that was what the name of it was. And so the second day was called the second day of the Sabbath. And the third day was the third day of the Sabbath. And they would do this because they're counting towards the Sabbath. So that's a starting point that we need to understand. But this Sabbaths in this verse is referring to the first of the Sabbaths. The Sabbaths of the 7 Sabbaths that lead to Pentecost. And this information is found in Leviticus 23:15. And ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete, even unto the morrow. After the 7th Sabbath shall ye number 50 days. This is 50 days. This is the Pentecost. And ye shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. So after the Sabbath, all right, and there's a specific the weekly Sabbath. There was going to be 7 Sabbaths to Pentecost. That's how you calculate Pentecost. This feast that was being the Jewish feast in Leviticus. You had a Sabbath. Then the next day is the first day of the Sabbaths, of the 7 Sabbaths that need to be completed to get to this festival. So when in Matthew it refers to the first here, the Sabbaths, and if we go back to Matthew, in the end of the Sabbath, it began to dawn towards the first day of the Sabbaths, basically. It's the first day of the Sabbaths towards towards Pentecost. And so that's what it's referring to. And so that the first day of that 7 weeks was a Sunday, because it comes after the Sabbath, as we saw in Leviticus. From the morrow after the Sabbath, then you will count 7 more Sabbaths, and the next day would be the feast. So when Matthew says that it's when he has basically the first day of the week, it's the first day of the Sabbaths, which was the first day of the week. And that's fundamental to understanding why you don't render that as Sabbath. You cannot render that as Sabbath, and it will not work. But unlike what some assert here, that the first weekly Sabbath, so I'm not going to actually. This is an argument over when there's an argument over when the Pentecost should actually start, whether it should start on the Sabbath, the countdown for this, whether you include the first Sabbath, or whether you have to count 7 more after the Sabbath is finished. And it becomes a little bit messy, but you have to you don't include that first Sabbath anyway. But the first day of the Sabbath is the first day of the week. It's the first day of these 7 Sabbaths that come after Passover. So once Passover is finished, all right, so once that's finished, then you count 7 weeks to this feast. And that's why Matthew refers to it as the first, or basically the first of the Sabbaths, because he's now counting towards Pentecost, or this feast, this Jewish feast. But there's also more vital information that is given in Matthew 28:1. This other Sabbath, Matthew states that it was in the end of the Sabbath. And the Greek there, opse de Sabbaton, it means after or late or in the evening, after the Sabbath. But again, that Sabbath is also plural. Matthew uses the plural of Sabbath twice in the verse. Once to refer to the 7 Sabbaths which are leading up to Pentecost, but also here at the end of the Sabbaths, because there were 2 Sabbaths that week. There wasn't just one Sabbath in the week itself. Now, I know this might get a little bit confusing, but Matthew is clearly demonstrating here that it was in the evening. It's after the Sabbath, but he's referring to 2 Sabbaths here in the top part, in the end of the Sabbaths. Matthew uses the plural. It can only mean he was referring to the evening of the new day, which was then leading to the 7 Sabbaths of the feast, which can only be the Sunday. But it came, this second Sabbath came after there had already been 2 in this week. Matthew records that the women, the Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, to see the sepulchre, they came after 2 Sabbaths had finished. They didn't come after just one. Now, the reason for that being is that when it comes to Passover, there are 2 Sabbaths that happen in a week, because the Passover then leads into the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, there's a lot of feasts and a lot of understanding here that you have to understand. But the Feast of Unleavened Bread finishes with a Sabbath, a high Sabbath. It's not a normal weekly Sabbath, it's a high Sabbath. There are special Sabbaths during the Jewish year. And one of those is on the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which starts after Passover. So you have Passover, which is when they have to sacrifice the lamb, which is what Jesus is. Then you have 7 days after that, which count as the week of unleavened bread, of 7 days of unleavened bread. And those 2 have a Sabbath at the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread and a Sabbath at the end. Now I'm going to look into that a little bit more in a moment. But okay, I want to quickly go back because I didn't actually refer to this. But back in Luke, when on the road with the disciples, so this is also showing that this couldn't have been a Sabbath. And behold, 2 of them went that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 60 furlongs. Now, 60 furlongs is 60, and 60 furlongs is about 12 kilometers. But the oral law says that you cannot walk on the Sabbath more than 960 meters away from one city. This is the Jewish oral law. So you're not allowed to walk in more than one line, more than 960 meters from the city limits. Now, if these were walking on the Sabbath, which is when they were supposedly have met Jesus if he rose on the Sabbath, when they met Jesus on the road, then they would have been breaking this law because they would have been walking 12 kilometers, which would have been against the law. Now, I'm not using that as it's not biblical law. It is part of the oral law. It was held to esteem by the Jews, but it's not conclusive that the two disciples would have followed that law, or even that law, that oral law, was actually in place at the time. But it is worthwhile noting that, it's a possibility that they wouldn't have walked that far. But when we go back to look again at the rising of Jesus, we see that John states, "Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in the midst and saith unto them, Peace be unto you." So this is the first day of the week. Now again, the Sabbaths here is the first day of the Sabbath. Okay. What has happened there? I have completely messed this up. I was doing one thing, and I've interjected all of this information, which should have been put in a different place. But I'm going to have to follow it now because it's all here. But it shouldn't have been interjected. All that other information I shouldn't have interjected. But I'll deal with that. All right. Okay. This is the plural Sabbaton. It's the first day of the 7 Sabbaths, being the Sunday. Now, the two disciples' statement while on the road to Emmaus does disprove the Wednesday and Friday crucifixion, if we take the resurrection as being on the Sunday morning, the first day of the week, because it can't work with Wednesday and it can't work with Friday. Now, when we look at this, Luke 24:21, it said, "But we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And beside all this, today is the 3rd day since these things were done." What things? And how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and have crucified him. So that's the things that are in reference. Today is the 3rd day since these things were done. 3 days since he was crucified. 3 days since. They do not say that this was the 3rd day. And this is a vital piece of information. They say it was today is the 3rd day since these things. This is counting backwards now, because it's since these things. We have to count backwards. Sunday, that's the resurrection day. All right, the 3rd day since the crucifixion. Saturday would be the 2nd day since the crucifixion. Friday would be the 1st day since the crucifixion. So the crucifixion couldn't have happened on the Friday, because it's since the crucifixion. The crucifixion could have only happened on the Thursday before the Friday, which is the 1st day since that it happened. So this counting backwards takes us back to Thursday. Jesus rose on the 1st day of the week early in the morning. So this was around sunrise of the Sunday morning of our modern calendar. If he rose on the Sunday evening, as he would have needed to have done to have remained dead for 3 days and 3 nights in the Friday understanding, he indeed he may have died on Friday, but we don't get that. So if he rose again on the evening, Scripture is wrong. But that's not the case. So that's not how the day that he died. So it might surprise people to know that there is not one verse that states that Jesus died on a Friday. Although it is so commonly understood that he died on a Friday, there's no verse that says this. Obviously, that doesn't prove that he didn't die on the Friday, but it's strange that there is no verse that says that. But the Bible doesn't actually give us a day as like a number for his death at all. But there is, however, a verse that would allude, at least at face value, to the fact that he did indeed die on a Friday. And it's certainly a verse that is very often cited as support for the Friday crucifixion. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was a high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So it says, because they didn't want him left up on the it was the preparation for the Sabbath, and they didn't want him left up on the cross on the Sabbath. So this, seeing the weekly Sabbath starts on Friday evening and goes through to Saturday evening, it could indicate that he was on the cross and dying on the Friday, and they didn't want him to stay up on the cross for the Sabbath day. But this verse leads to much confusion because they're not reading it correctly. The Jewish authorities wanted to remove him from the cross so that he wouldn't remain upon the Sabbath. But if you look there, it literally states, or John literally states, that the Sabbath day was a high Sabbath. So they didn't want him to remain on the cross on the Sabbath day, for the Sabbath day was a high Sabbath, or a high day. It was not the weekly Sabbath. That's not what is being referred to. There were, as we have already established, 2 Sabbaths that week. There were 2 Sabbaths which Matthew specifically points to. The weekly Sabbath, but also the Sabbath of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. At the end of that day, there was to be a feast, a Sabbath. So there were 2 Sabbaths that day, that week, and they didn't fall on the same day. So the high Sabbath would have been before the weekly Sabbath, in my understanding. So that would have been Thursday 6 p.m. to Friday 6 p.m. Then you have the weekly Sabbath, which was 6 p.m. on the Friday to Saturday 6 p.m. So there were 2 consecutive Sabbaths. Now, obviously, this is a very different understanding than the traditional view. But we have already established that Sunday was the resurrection day, the first day of the week. So the next thing to demonstrate is the claim, or my claim, that it was actually the Thursday and that there were 2 Sabbaths that week. And that the only way to actually get this to align is to have the 2 Sabbaths and Jesus having died on a Thursday. And the only way to incorporate 3 days and 3 nights consecutively, while taking all of the information into account. Jesus died on the Passover. So that's what we need to understand. Pilate confirmed that when he said, Pilate saith on John 18:38, Pilate saith unto him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and saith unto them, I find no fault at all in him. But ye have a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover. Will you therefore that I release unto you the King of the Jews? This being before Jesus was taken off to be crucified, which was the same day. Now, the Passover is a meal that is to be consumed on the evening of the Passover. And Passover is the 14th day of the month. Again, the Jewish month. And this is according to the Jewish calendar. In the 14th day of the first month, so it's the Jewish first month, and on the 14th day, at even, is the Lord's Passover. So this, in my understanding, would be Wednesday, 6 p.m. and Wednesday, 6 a.m. It would be the 6 p.m. of the Wednesday night to the 6 a.m. of what would now be Thursday. And that's using the modern calendar. Now, Passover being was literally Wednesday 6 p.m. until Thursday 6 p.m. That was the Passover day. But this was at even, so it's at the nighttime part. So it had to be the Wednesday 6 p.m. to the Thursday 6 a.m. That was the time of the Passover. The day after Passover is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the high Sabbath. So now this would be Thursday 6 p.m. to Friday 6 p.m. All right. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Unto the Lord 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. In the first day ye shall have an holy convocation, which means a Sabbath. You shall do no servile work therein. So this was a Sabbath. So the Passover being the 14th day, and the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread being the next day. The first day after the Passover is a Sabbath. So if we have Jesus dying on the Passover, the very next day would be a Sabbath day, which is a high Sabbath, which John refers to. The Last Supper was the Passover meal, observed on the Wednesday night, as stipulated in law. It had to be on the evening part of the Jewish day. Now we know that Jesus actually said that he was going to eat the Passover meal. Now, on one website that I found, they claim that Jesus did not eat the Passover meal. And this is actually, this author of this website actually argued for Thursday for the Thursday death of Jesus, the Thursday crucifixion. And he says, regarding Mark, Matthew, and Luke, one can get the impression that the Last Supper was the Passover meal. Some have even argued that Jesus might have eaten the Passover meal a day early, knowing ahead of time that he would be dead. But the fact is, Jesus ate no Passover meal in 30 AD. When the Passover meal began at sundown on Thursday, Jesus was already dead. He had been hastily put in a tomb until after the festival, when proper and full Jewish burial rites could be carried out. But then the author argues that Jesus only wanted to eat the Passover with his disciples, but actually didn't do it. And he appeals to Luke 22:14 in order to do that. There are some hints outside of John's gospel that such was the case. In Luke, for example, Jesus tells his followers at the last meal, I earnestly wanted to eat this Passover with you before I suffer, but I won't eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. A later copyist of the manuscript inserted the word again to make it say, I won't eat it again. Well, this is just factually incorrect. It is a bit of a sidetrack, but the claims made here are simply incorrect. Jesus actually states in Luke 22:14 through 16, and when the hour was come, he sat down, and the 12 apostles with him, and he said unto them, with desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you, before I suffer. For I say unto you, I will not any more eat thereof until it be fulfilled in the kingdom of God. There is no again in the verse. There's no again in the Greek. No copyist has added the word again in this verse because it does not exist in the Greek manuscripts. While it is true that some English versions have the word again in the verse, that is simply being used by the English translators to interpret the meaning of I won't eat it again or anymore. I will not eat it anymore until. Now this clearly meaning that he would not eat it again until it had been fulfilled in the kingdom of God. So I would recommend some studies into textual criticism for the author, whoever wrote that. What you can clearly see is that Jesus sat down with the 12 apostles with him, and he said unto them, with desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you. So they've sat down, and he's with the disciples, and he's saying, I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. But I say unto you, I will not eat it any more, or I will not any more eat thereof until it be fulfilled in the kingdom of God. But he is sat down to eat this Passover. And it is very clearly the Last Supper is the Passover. Because in Mark 14, we get the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, his disciples said unto him, where will we prepare, go and prepare where we eat this Passover? Where I shall eat the Passover. The master saith, where is the gastekeeper? Where I shall eat the Passover. And they made ready the Passover. All right, this is all the Passover. The Passover, 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 Passover. They're going to prepare, the disciples went off to prepare to eat the Passover with Jesus, and that's what they sat down and ate. Right, now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, right? So he knew that he was going to depart out of the world. Then they eat then supper. They have the Passover meal now. The Passover is the first day of unleavened bread. In the first month of the 14th day of the month at even, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 20th day of the month. Now this confuses people as well, because the Passover, while it is not a itself, while it is not a high Sabbath, and it's not part of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It is a day of unleavened bread. So, in the Jewish understanding, right, what we need to understand is how this works. So you have the Passover day. The Passover day, right, is an unleavened day of unleavened bread, and you eat the Passover meal. Now, the Passover starts at what we would understand as 6 p.m. until 6 p.m. of the next day. So let's say, from my understanding, that this is Wednesday, 6 p.m. to Thursday, 6 p.m. So that would be the Passover day. The Passover is eaten at the evening part of that. So that would be the Wednesday, 6 p.m. to the Thursday, 6 a.m. That's the evening part of the Passover day. Then Jesus was crucified on the day part of the Passover, after they've eaten the Passover. So this is now after the 6 a.m. on the Thursday. But after the Passover day finishes, then you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is 7 days. The first day of that is a high Sabbath, which comes the day after the Passover. So we have the Passover meal, then Jesus dies on the Passover, then the next day starts the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a high Sabbath, which is why they needed Jesus to come down off the cross, not because of the weekly Sabbath, but because of the high Sabbath. John specifically says that this Sabbath was a high Sabbath. And we know that after Passover, the next day is a high Sabbath. So there are actually 8 days inclusive of unleavened bread. The Passover is a day of unleavened bread, and then the Feast of Unleavened Bread is 7 days. But they're separate festivals, the Passover and then the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread both include, obviously, unleavened bread. So you get 8 full days of unleavened bread. 1 day is the Passover, and then 7 days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. 8 days in total. That's why it says from the 14th day to the 20th day. Right. After the Passover meal, Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane. So this is still the evening part. After they've eaten their meal, it's still dark. It's still the evening part of the Jewish day. Then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and said unto his disciples, Sit ye here while I go and pray yonder. And this was where Jesus was then betrayed by Judas and arrested. Jesus was taken first to Annas. Then the band and the captain and officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him and led him away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas, which was the high priest that same year. So this is still the nighttime. Later, Jesus was then taken to a second place, Caiaphas, the high priest, for questioning. And now Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas, the high priest. Now we know that this is still nighttime, as Jesus had told Peter that before the night had ended, the cock would crow, bringing in the morning. Peter would deny him 3 times and then the cock would crow. But this hasn't happened yet. So we know that this must still be the night time of the Passover day. So they've eaten the Passover meal, and Jesus has now been taken to two places while it's still dark. It's still night. Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto you, that this night, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice, or 3 times. It was then that Jesus was taken to Pilate. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment. And it was early. Now it was early. So he's been taken to the two places, and now it's starting to become early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. They had to go and eat the Passover because it's now becoming early. They've taken him off to Pontius Pilate, but they now need to go and eat the Passover before it gets to the day part of the Passover day. But Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? Now we know that this was now the morning because the cock had now crowed, signifying the start of the day. Now, Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him after he'd been taken to him. But John, who was writing to the Romans, this is why this is so, it is confusing, because there are so many different pieces of information here that we need to understand, that they don't just come from how we understand things, 12 o'clock till 12 o'clock. That's not how the Jews work. That's not the Jewish day. And they have different terminology for, and they're writing to different people. But John was writing to the Romans using Roman time, and states that the time was about 6 a.m. in the morning of the Passover. So this would be the Thursday morning. And it was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. So this is Roman time. So this is what we would understand as the 6th hour, from 12 o'clock till 6. So it's 6 a.m. And he saith unto the Jews, Behold your king. So this is now 6 a.m. when Jesus is in front of Pilate. But notice John says that this was the day of the preparation of the Passover. Again, this many people misunderstood or misunderstand what this day of preparation of the weekly. They think that this is the preparation of the Passover, is the preparation of the weekly Sabbath. But we can clearly see that John says it's the preparation of the Passover, not the weekly Sabbath. In fact, the Catholic.com says, but this explanation will not do. In the first century, the day of preparation referred to Friday, not the day before Passover. Further, we know from Scripture that the Sabbath following Jesus' crucifixion was the regular weekly Sabbath, the 7th day of the week. And they refer to Matthew 28:1, where it says, Now after the Sabbath, towards the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to the sepulchre. That article then proceeds to give the timeline of the crucifixion and resurrection. And they have Friday, the day of preparation, up at the top. Then Saturday, the Sabbath. And then Sunday, the first day of the week. And they say, right at the bottom in that red writing, those anti-Catholics who allege that the church commemorates Christ's death on the wrong day are themselves in the wrong. The appropriate time for Christians to gather to commemorate Christ's death is indeed Good Friday, not a hypothetical crucifixion on Wednesday. Now, obviously, I'm not arguing for Wednesday. But as we have already seen in that Matthew 28:1, Jesus refers to plural Sabbaths, 2 Sabbaths, not one singular Sabbath. And John explicitly states that it was the preparation of the Passover, not the weekly Sabbath. So whoever wrote that article is either unaware of those facts or has missed the clear reference to the preparation of the Passover, or they have completely misunderstood it, or they are deliberately misrepresenting the text. The preparation of the Passover is not the preparation for the Passover, right? Which is what they've asserted there. If you have a look, it says, in what part of the article there? Might have been the one before. The day of preparation referred to Friday. Well, this isn't referring to the preparation of the weekly Sabbath, and it's not referring to the preparation of the Sabbath, the Passover either. The preparation of the Passover is to get ready for the start of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which starts the day after Passover and is a high Sabbath. So the day of Passover is a normal day, although it's obviously the Passover day, but there's no, it's not a Sabbath. So they need to prepare for the next day. Passover is itself a day of preparation. While as Friday would be a day of preparation to get ready for the weekly Sabbath, where they weren't allowed to do certain things, also the Passover is a day where they have to prepare for the next day, which is a high Sabbath. It's the same Sabbath as a weekly Sabbath in that you can't do certain things. So they have to prepare for it. So the preparation of the Passover is in preparation for the next day, which is a high Sabbath. We get that in Numbers 28:16. And in the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of the Lord. And in the 15th day of the month is the feast. Right? 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread or be eaten. In the first day shall be an holy convocation. You shall do no manner of servile work therein. So the day after Passover, so the Passover is the 14th. And then the next day is the start of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But the first day of that feast is a Sabbath. So they can't do any work, so they have to prepare for it. So the preparation of the Passover is the preparation of the Passover for the next day, the Sabbath of the first day of unleavened bread. The Greek word translated as preparation is paraskou. And it means preparation, the day of preparation. If you have a look there, it says for a Sabbath or a feast. It doesn't mean the weekly Sabbath or just the weekly Sabbath. It's a preparation for a Sabbath or a feast. Well, the next day is a feast of unleavened bread, which is a Sabbath, so they have to prepare for it. And Luke says in 23:54, and that day was the preparation and the Sabbath drew on. Right. So we're going to go back now and see, does does Luke make it clear that this was before the weekly Sabbath and that there was only one Sabbath? Now, this is where some people, and I've actually had this used against me, is that Luke is only saying that there was one Sabbath. And so Luke should be the one that we listen to. And that day was the preparation, and the Sabbath drew on. However, we have already seen which day of preparation this was. It was the preparation of the Passover, as attested to by John. The Sabbath that Luke referred to was not the weekly Sabbath, but the high Sabbath that John also referred to. Luke simply referred to it as a Sabbath rather than as a high Sabbath, because a high Sabbath is also a Sabbath. So it's not, although it is a high Sabbath, it is still a Sabbath. And Luke just calls it a Sabbath because you can say it's the Sabbath day. But John specifically tells us that it is the high Sabbath. Luke was not referring to the weekly Sabbath at this point. The Gospel of John gives that extra information that we don't get in Luke. And we also know that Matthew states that there were two Sabbaths. So it clearly states in Matthew that there were two Sabbaths that week. We know that one of those was a high Sabbath because it comes directly after the Passover meal. The day after the Passover is a high Sabbath. So we know that that's a high Sabbath. And we know that John refers to the high Sabbath. So we know that there are two Sabbaths in this week. But Luke is specifically referring to one Sabbath, the one which followed the day of the crucifixion. Right? So when he says, and the day was the preparation, he's referring to the day which is Passover, because that's the day of preparation for the next day, which is a Sabbath, the high Sabbath. And that's what Luke is referring to in Luke 23:54. He's specifically referring to the preparation of the Passover, and he's referring to the Sabbath of the next day after the Passover, which is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a Sabbath. Now, if we look at the Greek that Luke uses, so in Luke 23:56, so this is now referring to the women, and they returned and prepared spices and ointments and rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment. Right, so these are the women. So we have in verse 54, we're talking about the preparation. Then Luke mentions the women, and then he says, and they returned and prepared spices and ointments and rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment. In this verse, Luke is now referring to the weekly Sabbath. So he refers to the Sabbath of the high Sabbath in verse 54, and then he refers to the weekly Sabbath in verse 56. And we know that because of the Greek that Luke uses. Right? In 56, he uses this Greek word men. And he uses that before the word Sabbath. Now, this is the only place that this is used. This is not repeated anywhere else in the New Testament. Men is a disjunctive particle, which shows affirmation of something, a certainty. Luke makes it very clear that the Sabbath that he is referring to in this verse is the specific Sabbath of the commandment. The Sabbath day according to the commandment. It is not the high Sabbath. This is the commandment Sabbath, which is the weekly Sabbath. So he's specifically identifying that we have two different Sabbaths, and now he's letting you know that the women rested on the Sabbath of the commandment. He makes no such reference in verse in 54, right? And it's this word, and on the indeed Sabbath, the specific Sabbath they rested, the one of the commandment, this specific one. So he identifies two Sabbaths himself. One is the high Sabbath, which comes after the day of preparation, which is the Passover. And then there's the high Sabbath. And then that followed by the weekly Sabbath, the one of the commandment. So we need to put all four Gospels together in order to be able to answer this. So we must then ask, if Jesus died on a Wednesday and the next day was a high Sabbath, why the women waited until after the weekly Sabbath to come and anoint Jesus's body, when they would have had a day in between, right? In the Wednesday understanding, you have the high Sabbath, right? You have the Nisan 14 there. That's the day that he was supposedly died, which was the Wednesday. Then you have the high Sabbath, but then you have this Nisan 16. Well, this is a free day. This wouldn't be classified as a Sabbath. It's just a day that is free. So why didn't they come and anoint Jesus's body this day? Right? They had a whole day to do that. And then the weekly Sabbath, which they rested, and then they supposedly came long time after Jesus had already resurrected in this understanding, to anoint the body. But they had a whole day to anoint the body in between the high Sabbath and the weekly Sabbath under the Wednesday understanding. That makes no sense. Now, Mark, who wrote to the Jews, right, said that this was the third hour and they crucified him. And Mark continues on, and we find that it was the 6th hour. So now we're using we're using the Jewish time. They crucified him on the 3rd hour. Well, if the Jewish time starts at 6 a.m., the 3rd hour of the day part of the day would be 9 a.m. And then at the 6th hour, which would now be 12 o'clock, our time, daytime, that was when the darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour, which would be 3 p.m. And it's at that 3 p.m. on the day of the Passover that Jesus cried out. On the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which is being interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And that's when he died. Right? And Jesus cried with a loud voice and gave up the ghost. So that was 3 p.m. on the day of Passover, which would have been Thursday. Because the Passover would have started on Wednesday evening at 6 o'clock. Then you have the Passover being eaten overnight until 6 a.m., which would now be the Thursday, what we would call Thursday. And then the day part of the Passover starts, and Jesus died at 3 p.m. on that day of the Passover. Then, so now it's Thursday, at 6 p.m., you have Jesus, you have the start of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a Sabbath, which goes through to 6 p.m. on Friday. So that's a Sabbath. And then 6 p.m. on Friday to 6 p.m. on Saturday is the next Sabbath, is the weekly Sabbath. And then Jesus rises early the first day of the week, which is what we would call Sunday. So you have Passover, Wednesday, 6 p.m. to Thursday, 6 p.m. The High Sabbath starts at Thursday, 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Friday. The weekly Sabbath is 6 p.m. Friday to 6 p.m. Saturday. And then the first day of the week, which starts at Saturday, 6 p.m. till Sunday, 6 p.m. And Jesus rose what we would know as the early part of the first day of the week at the dawning of the sun. So that would have had to have been the Sunday, what we would know as the Sunday that he rose. But it's the first day of the week. It's certainly not the Sabbath. There's nothing there that says that he rose on the Sabbath. So if Jesus died at 3 p.m. on Thursday, you have to understand that Jews have something called inclusive reckoning. So any part of a day is classified as a day. Any part of the day. Even if it was right at the end of the day, it's still classified as that would be one day. So Jesus died at 3 p.m. on the Thursday. So that is day one. Okay. Then you have night one, which is Thursday 6 p.m. to Friday 6 a.m. because that would be the night part of a Jewish day. Then day two, which is Friday 6 a.m. to Friday 6 p.m. Then night two, which is Friday 6 p.m. to Saturday 6 a.m. Day three, Saturday 6 a.m. to Saturday 6 p.m. And then night three is Saturday 6 p.m. to Sunday 6 a.m. when he rose, roughly around about sometime around Sunday 6 a.m. because at the dawning of the day on the first day of the week, which is the Sunday. So in my understanding, we get 3 days and 3 nights if Jesus dies on the Thursday. But if we do Wednesday, we have a problem because we get 4 days and 4 nights. Because we know that we cannot have Jesus rising on the Sabbath because that's not scripture. So if he dies at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, that's day one. We get night one, Wednesday 6 p.m. to Thursday 6 a.m., which is the start of the High Sabbath. Day two, night two. Day three, night three. Day four, night four. And so there, I've put it onto there in the red. Now we know where the resurrection happens. It's at the arrow, right, on the Sunday. He rises at the time of the rising of the sun, just before the rising of the sun. That's the resurrection. So it can't be where the X is, where they've got it, because that would be that he rose on the Sabbath. But we have that goes against the clear biblical attestation to him rising on the first day of the week. And if he dies on the Wednesday and he resurrects on the Sunday, then we end up with 4 days and 4 nights, and that cannot work. So he cannot die there. So we have to move all of that across one day. We moved the Nisan 14 and the High Sabbath day, we moved that across. That then closes together the High Sabbath and the weekly Sabbath together, because you get rid of that day in the middle. So you get 2 consecutive Sabbaths. But Jesus then died on the Thursday instead of the Wednesday, and he rises at the correct time. And only when you remove that day in the middle, that Nisan 16, only when you move that, you simply move that out of the way, close the two the High Sabbath and the weekly Sabbath together, all right, and then you eliminate that 4th day and 4th night. You eliminate it. And so you get 3 days and 3 nights. And only when you do that do you get the correct day. And so that's why I know that this has been quite a confusing study, and I actually had things in a slightly different order than what I should have had them in. But when you look at these days, right, it's only by closing those 2 Sabbaths together, and you move the high Sabbath day from this Thursday to Friday section here, do we get that removal of that 4th day and 4th night. Now, I know why they've done this, because whoever came up with this idea that it was the Wednesday, I know why they've done it, because they've obviously tried to get 72 hours. And they've misunderstood what Matthew said about the Sabbath. Right, where Matthew was referring to 2 Sabbaths. And then he was also referring to the Sabbaths of the coming Pentecost. So they've misunderstood the first day of the Sabbath as being translated as the Sabbath, when it's actually Sabbaths plural, referring to the 7 Sabbaths which then lead to Pentecost. So they've just misunderstood what that Sabbath there was, because they've not understood that it's in the plural, and that what it's actually referring to, because they haven't linked it together with the Old Testament scripture about the 7 Sabbaths that follow this, which follow Passover. So they've misunderstood. It's just by misunderstanding what that Sabbath is referring to in Matthew 28:1. So when you understand that there are 2 Sabbaths in Matthew 28:1, let's bring Matthew 28:1 back up again. You should be able to find it. Let's have a look. Let's go back. Bring Matthew 28:1 up. I've got quite a lot of okay. So I have got it there, right? So the 28:1, in the end of the Sabbath, which is plural. So this literally reads, in the end of the Sabbaths, because that is plural. It should be plural. It shouldn't be just singular, because the Greek is plural. Because there were 2 Sabbaths that week. The weekly Sabbath and the high Sabbath. So basically, at the end of the 2 Sabbaths, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the Sabbaths that lead to the feast. That's how it could be rendered. But we've got the first day of the week because we know that first day that leads us to Pentecost, that 50 days, comes after the Sabbath of the it comes after the Passover. So we have the Passover, then we start then we have the Sabbath, and then it's the 7 Sabbaths which lead down. This is a confusing verse in the Greek. It's a confusing verse in the English, to be honest. But if you don't understand this verse correctly and understand that the Sabbaths here are both in plural, these are both in the plural, these Sabbaths here in this verse. If you miss this, if you don't understand this, you're not going to be able to understand when Jesus died. This is fundamental part. This verse, Matthew 28:1, is a fundamental part to understanding when Jesus died and when he rose again. But we know that I'm gonna go back over that timeline because this is quite fundamental. So in fact, let me go back to this. So this timeline is fundamental to understanding. So the Passover, right, starts Wednesday 6 p.m. and goes all the way through to Thursday 6 p.m. That is the Passover. But the Passover is eaten on the Wednesday evening part of that day. So Jesus ate the Passover and it's still dark. Then he goes off to pray and it's still dark. He is arrested and it's still dark. He's taken to the 2 places and it's still dark. But then he is taken to Pilate right at the start of the day, basically. So the day starts, the sun comes up, and it's now Thursday, 6 a.m. And Jesus is taken off to Pilate. By 9 p.m., Jesus is being scourged. At 12 p.m., Jesus is up on the cross. And at 3 p.m., Jesus died. That's on the Thursday. And that counts as day 1 because of the inclusive reckoning. He's then put into the tomb before 6 p.m. because obviously they have to get him into the tomb before 6 p.m. because the next day, right, which starts from Thursday 6 p.m. So it's still, Thursday 6:01. This is now the high Sabbath. Because Passover is now finished and it's into the Sabbath, not the weekly Sabbath, the Sabbath that comes after the Passover. And then we get the weekly Sabbath, which starts here at night 2, right, at the end of day 2. and it starts at the beginning of night 2, which is Friday 6 p.m. That's the weekly Sabbath. And that goes through to Saturday 6 p.m. So it incorporates a night 2 and the day 3. And that is the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath. And then Jesus is in the grave, in the tomb, until approximately around about Sunday 6 a.m. So that incorporates the night 3. And then he rises, which is the first day of the week, at the dawning of the sun, the early. And that is the only way that this can work. Jesus eats the Passover meal, despite some people saying that he didn't. Then he's arrested, taken off, scourged, up on the cross, dies, all on Passover Day, and is in the tomb before the high Sabbath starts. Then we get the high Sabbath, then the weekly Sabbath, and then Jesus resurrects. And so it is complicated. It's very complicated to understand this correctly. And if you miss any of this, it is on my website. You can go and have a look at all of this writing on my website, www.followingtruth.com. In fact, I'll put a link to the writing. In fact, what I will do, I'll do it now. I shall put it into the description, but I shall also post it in the comment here. Right. Okay. I have missed. I don't know why, but once I posted that, all these comments have come up. So I do apologize if I've missed your comments, but so I'm just going through the comments a second. Right. Okay. Dennis, you asked that. You like I say, I haven't seen any of these comments for some reason. They were hidden. Now I don't know if I've answered that correctly for you. So hello, Chrissy. Hello, Tungji, Patrick. Thank you for being here, Dennis. Shelley Davis, thank you for being here. Lion Farm. Yeah, I didn't see all of these comments. These were all hidden. Dennis, did I actually answer your question? Because if I think I did, but you might not have been quite here when I actually stated that. So was early in the morning after the Sabbath, was Jesus risen, or did he appear? Both. Mark 16:9 is the verse that you need for that. Let's see if I can find you Mark 16:9, just in case you haven't seen it. There. That's the verse you need. So that's the verse you need. So now when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had 7 devils. So we have that they came early on the first day of the week, but we also have Mark 16:9 that says, now when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week. Now early there is is proi, means dawn. Okay. So while we do have that they came, in my understanding, the way that I read this is it's kind of like as they're coming to the sepulchre at the dawning of the day, they're coming. So they leave while it's still dark. They arrive just as the sun starts to come up, and Jesus is just risen. He's literally just risen as they kind of get there. That's how I understand that. So we do get now when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week. Now we know that in Mark 16:1, and when the Sabbath was passed, so we know that obviously it's gone past the Sabbath. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, they brought spices that they might come and anoint him. So the Sabbath is past. They're now going, all right. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they come to the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. So it's literally at the rising of the sun that they come. But we know from Mark 16:9, this is when Jesus is risen. When Jesus was risen early the first day of the week. So literally they both happen kind of at the same time. They've left during the while it's still dark. They leave to go and anoint Jesus, and as they get there, the sun starts to come up, and it's then like literally at that same time that Jesus rises from the dead, and they feel the earthquake, and the stone is rolled away, and this is kind of all happening in probably in moments. I wouldn't even imagine this is taken like 10-15 minutes, but I mean it doesn't give us that exact amount of that time frame for it, but what we definitely have is that Jesus is rising early the first day of the week, and that they come at the dawning of the day. So I would say that it's like literally at the same time with that earthquake all happening at the same time. And I think that earthquake kind of indicates that is the resurrection. There's a miracle happened. That earthquake happens. The miracle has happened. The stone rolls away, and they get there, and he's just risen from the dead. And they go into the and he's not there. So that to me is my understanding of when all of that happens. So hopefully, Dennis, I have now explained my position anyway, what I believe. Now, I'm not saying that everybody else must believe this. I just think that this is what works with the scripture. So, okay, Dennis, yeah. So you agree that Jesus was risen on the Sunday, but I think you could read Mark 16:9 differently as well. Yeah. Okay. I could agree with that. So how would you, I will ask you how you would read that. So you've got now when Jesus was risen, early the first day of the week, he appeared. Okay, you could have that. The only problem you're going to have with reading it that way, and I can see how you can read it that way, because you're just moving the comma basically, because the commas weren't included in obviously the original Greek. That is an English rendering of the Greek, and so it's an arbitrary. Technically, it's an arbitrary comma. Doesn't necessarily need to be there. So you could read that as now when Jesus was risen. Early the first day of the week, he appeared. Right. So, okay. So early the first day of the week, he appeared to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. The only problem with that you're going to have from my point of view, is that you've now removed the only verse that states when Jesus rose. Because you've said you agree that Jesus was risen on the Sunday, but you don't have a verse for it. You don't have a verse that says that Jesus rose on the first day of the week, because this is the only verse that you have that states that Jesus rose. All right, so you don't have a time frame anymore. So if you remove this verse from being able to say that this was when Jesus rose early the first day of the week, you've now taken away that verse. Now I'm going to say to you, and maybe you know of a verse that says it, but where is your verse now that tells you that Jesus rose on the first day of the week and that he didn't rise on the Sabbath, as the Wednesday postulation would have us understand it? So if you take away this verse, I'm now going to challenge you to give us a verse that states it when Jesus rose, because I think that this is the only verse that actually explicitly states when Jesus rose from the dead. So if we remove that verse, I'm going to leave it to you and say, can you show me a verse that says when Jesus rose from the dead? John 18:22. I'm going to be doing on Sunday. I'm going to do an open discussion on Sunday. So Sunday evening, you can come and ask any kind of questions that you want. I'm going to, while this one is specific to, I'd rather keep this one on topic. On Sunday, I'm not going to have a topic. I'm just going to have an open discussion. So people can come on, they can discuss whatever they want. It doesn't even have to remain religious. I'm just going to have an open discussion. So I'd like to keep it as scriptural, biblical as possible, but I'm not going to be too fussed about it on Sunday. I'm going to try, hopefully every Sunday, and maybe even one day during the week, to just have an open discussion for people to just come on or post questions and see if we can answer it. And if we can't answer it, see if we can answer it. See if we can find the answer. We'll go on to the internet. We'll search through some of the books that I've got. We'll go on and have a look at websites and whatever, and scripture and everything in order to try and answer the questions, because I'm quite positive I'm not going to have the answer to every single question that somebody's going to ask me. And if I don't have the answer, I'm not going to make it up. So what I'll do is on a Sunday evening, probably do like a kind of Bible study, in the sense that we'll just do random questions that could pertain to kind of anything at all. I'm not over fussed on it, but if we can keep them biblical, even better. But we can go into other topics, and maybe I might even set up 2 different days. One Sunday where it's just biblical, and then another day where we can just discuss kind of everything and anything. I'm hopefully next week at some point. I've got two therapists that I'm in contact with, which hopefully will be coming on and give an outline of mental health therapy that I really want to start advocating on my channel. So it's something that I would like to get involved with in helping people with issues. So I've got a lot of things that I want to do with this channel, not just specifically related to Bible study. I want to make it more of an open channel for people to be able to come on and just discuss the Bible in general, but also life, just kind of help, and when anything that people need help with, really, or they just want to discuss, or they want to. I've got some ideas of some other videos that I'd like to do in the coming future, the near future, I would say. And I'm going to try and get on here as much as I possibly can and do as many videos as possible. But yeah, so on Sunday, John, please come back. We'll do some discussions of Bible verses and look at some of your questions. And I want to do a couple of videos. Okay, I found something from John 1931. So I found something from John 1931. We know that Jesus died on the day before the Sabbath, that is Friday, and when after the Sabbath the women came to the tomb, the grave was empty. Yeah, the problem with that is that if we go to John 1931, so let's do that. I have got that verse. Let me see if I can find it without actually going off. John 1931. Let's see if I can find John 1931. We did do this one. Where is it? Where's John 1931? Right. Wow. Okay. Let me see if I can. How far down was it? I'm going to go right back to the beginning now of all my slides, like John 1931. Probably been easier to just go on and bring this up. Why have I missed it? Have I missed it? Or do I not have John 1931? Okay, no, I don't think I have. Right, John. $1931. Oh dear. Right, I need to add that to screen. So let me see if I can add that to screen. Share screen, window, share my screen. So there you go, John 1931. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation that the bodies should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day. For that I have got this verse. How did I not find that verse on my slides there? John 1931. Right, I'm going to go back and find that because I have that highlighted. And it's about midway. Right. Apologies, but I've definitely got this verse. There it is. I'm not sure how I missed that. Right. So the Jews. Let me remove that comment. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day. For that, this is the important part here. For that Sabbath day was a high day. It's the high Sabbath. It's not the weekly Sabbath. This isn't the weekly Sabbath. This is the Sabbath that comes after the Passover. After the Passover is a Sabbath day, which is a high Sabbath. It's the Sabbath of the first day of unleavened bread. All right. And on the 15th day, so on the 14th day is Passover. In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. Now the next day after Passover and the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread unto the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. In the first day you shall have an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. This is a Sabbath. This is John referring to the high Sabbath. So we have Passover. Yeah, okay. So in your view, which is why it's a great Sabbath. No, because the high Sabbath is just the is a non-weekly Sabbath. It's a feast Sabbath. It's one of the special Sabbaths during the year, and that's why Matthew in Matthew 28:1 says when the Sabbaths plural had finished. That's why Matthew refers to 2 Sabbaths. Back in Matthew 28:1, where he says in the end of the Sabbath, right? But that word there in the Greek is plural. It's Sabbaths, right? It's that there. It's Sabbaton. First, Sabbaton, Sabbaths. There are 2 Sabbaths there. So there has to be 2 Sabbaths there. You can't only have you can't have them on the same day. They're plural. Yeah. This here, Matthew 28:1, which is opse de Sabbaton, which means after or late in the evening of the Sabbaths. So it's plural. So that's why I don't think that can work with the one Sabbath. Now I understand how, and like I say, I'm not trying to say that anybody has to have my understanding of this. I'm just giving the evidence of what I say. So so you mean 2 Sabbaths that fall on different days? Yeah, I see that the 2 Sabbaths, like when we look at that Wednesday understanding again, the line from the Passover isn't a Sabbath. It's the next day after the Passover is a Sabbath. The Sabbath itself is not. So the Passover itself is not a Sabbath. There's no instruction to do no work in the Passover day. In fact, they have to kill the lamb and everything on the Sabbath. So But when you look at the high Sabbath here on the Wednesday, they have these two, the high Sabbath and the weekly Sabbath, separated by this middle day. And so you've got all I have is I take out this Nisan 16 and close up these days. And so the Nisan 16 just moves over to that weekly Sabbath. And then you have the high Sabbath right next to it. So you just literally remove Nisan 16 from the equation, and the high Sabbath then becomes next to the weekly Sabbath, and that's why you refer to two Sabbaths. I don't think Matthew would have been able to refer to two Sabbaths if they would have both fallen on the same day. Yeah, there is no scripture that says that the Passover is a Sabbath. Unless you can find me that scripture that says the Passover, it clearly states that the next day is the Passover. You have the 14th, which is the Lord's Passover, and then the next day is the first day of unleavened bread, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a Passover, is a Sabbath. The Passover itself is not a high Sabbath. There's no scripture that says the Passover is a Sabbath. And if the Passover is a Sabbath, which I don't believe it to be, but if you can find that verse that says that the Passover is a Sabbath, and I do have that wrong, and I might have that wrong, and I'm willing to fully accept that. If you have that, then I would say that there were 3 Sabbaths in that week, and that the Passover is a Sabbath, and the high Sabbath would be the next day. I can't see that being correct. I've never known the Passover to be classified as a Sabbath itself. It is the day of preparation for the high Sabbath, but as far as I know, that the Passover itself is not a Sabbath day. But yeah, Dennis, I think if the 2 Sabbaths fall on the same day, that would just be a Sabbath, although it would be a high Sabbath, which is what you referred to, which I can understand that would become a high Sabbath, but then you wouldn't have the Sabbaths plural. I don't think Matthew would be able to refer to them as plural, because it would just still be one day, although it would be a special day, a high Sabbath, like John would refer to it as. If you have that, you now have the problem of the 2 Sabbaths being called Sabbaths in the plural, even though they fall on one day. Now, it is possible, but now you have Friday, which is obviously the traditional understanding of, but then you have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 days, but then you only get 2 nights, because you get the Friday night and you get the Saturday night. So I don't think, like I say, I can't ignore the 3 nights that Jesus refers to. That's the thing. I cannot ignore those 3 nights. So, because Jesus literally states, he says, this is the only sign that I'm going to give you. Right? Because they were asking, give us a sign that these things. And Jesus says, no other sign is going to be given to this wicked generation, apart from the sign of Jonah. And then he specifically states at the, so if I go right up there, he specifically states, for as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Now, why didn't he just say, I'll be in the earth for 3 days? Or it's going to be 3 days. Why does he say 3 days and 3 nights? So I can't ignore the on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Yeah, that is a holy day. That's the 15th day. That's not the day of Passover. The day of Passover is the 14th. So you have the Passover, which is the Lord's Passover, which is the 14th day. Then you have the start of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the 15th. So that is correct. And the 15th day is an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work on the 15th day. But the Passover is the 14th day. So the Passover is not the 15th day. Yeah, I don't. So I don't have the problem of the 3 days and 3 nights because I have him dying on the Thursday rather than the Friday. I can't work those scriptures out. I cannot get those scriptures to correlate for 3 days and 3 nights because I cannot ignore the 3 nights part of the statement. Because when you go and have a look at the story of Jonah, it literally states that Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights in Jonah 1:17. So we'll have to scroll right the way through to find Jonah 1:17. I had it. I do have it somewhere. I might do next time is actually record what slide these are written on. That might be the best way. Because I think I've gone past it already. Let me find. Yeah, I have. It's right at the beginning. And after the mark. So I had all of these. They should be easy for me to find. There it is. Jonah 1:17. Sorry. There you go. I'm going to work this out one day. So there. Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. So I can't ignore that. For me, I'm not going to ignore that. I know that some people do, and like I say, they just refer to it as 3 days. But with all of the other biblical attestation where we have days and nights, like when it, as I showed, when it rains for 40 days and 40 nights, the Bible does refer to days and nights. And it doesn't, and so I don't think that you can ignore when it states nights. You have to include that in your understanding. And so if he died on a Friday, I think what you get is you get 3 days if you're including Friday and Saturday and Sunday, but you get 2 nights, Friday night and Saturday night, and you cannot put them. And if you're okay with ignoring the nights part of it and you're just going to go, right, okay, he rose on the 3rd day, then maybe you can work that out, Friday to Sunday. You can maybe make that work, which obviously you'd have to ignore the evening parts of it. So yeah, I'm not really sure why we would ignore that, but I think that the only reason you would ignore the nights part of it is if you wanted to, if you need it to be Friday. So yeah, like I say, I'm not telling you that that Jesus rose on the Thursday. This is what I believe, and what I believe from the scriptures, and what I've argued for it. And I believe that the scriptures tell us that Jesus died on the Thursday, and that there were two Sabbaths: the high Sabbath that John refers to, the weekly Sabbath. And I think that Luke identifies those two Sabbaths as well, by when he says that there was one Sabbath which came after the preparation, and then he refers to the next Sabbath, which he says is the indeed Sabbath, that specific one of the commandment. So he's referring to the Sabbath of the commandment, which is the weekly Sabbath. The Passover Sabbath isn't the commandment, that's the law. That was the added law. And so I think that Luke identifies two Sabbaths as well. So I think that Matthew and John give us two Sabbaths, and they specifically give us two Sabbaths. And I think that John specifically tells us that one of those Sabbaths was the high Sabbath, which is the one that they wanted to take Jesus down from. I think that Mark gives us the exact time of when Jesus rose. And so I think that when you put all of those scriptures together, Luke, Matthew, Mark, and John all together, taking into account the feast of Passover and the feast of the unleavened bread, where we have clear biblical attestation that the Passover is one day, then the next day is a high Sabbath, and Jesus died on Passover, and that the next day is the high Sabbath. I think that when you have all of that, and that's why I come to Thursday and not just not Friday, because I think that it's the only day that can work with all of them. I can see Wednesday works unless. So with the way that you read Matthew, Mark 16:9, the way that you read that, which then takes away the time when the explicit time when Jesus rose, I think that Wednesday could work if you take away that verse. If you remove that, if you take away that specific time of Jesus rising at the start of the first day, you now don't have a time when Jesus rose, because you've taken away the verse that says when Jesus rose. Now you could go back and figure that out and have Jesus dying on the Wednesday, and that would work, because then you could say that he rose on the Sabbath. I think that there's problems. It's problematic to have Jesus rising on a Sabbath. But then you could argue that now Jesus has died, he's resurrecting, and he's becoming the Sabbath. So he could now be taking over the Sabbath and showing that the Sabbath is no longer something that you have to observe. So there's that argument. And if you have that, Wednesday could possibly work. I think that if you take away take away Mark 16:9 and you understand it in a different way, I think you can get Wednesday to work. I'd still have a problem with that day in the middle. I still don't like that day in the middle, that middle day, because I still can't figure out if that was correct. Let's take away that resurrection and say that this is correct. In fact, let me go and put it on the right on this one. Yeah. So if we say that this is all correct, and so Jesus did rise on that week, on that Sabbath, I still have a problem with this Friday, which is in between the high Sabbath and the weekly Sabbath, where the women could have come, and if it was really important to anoint Jesus, why they didn't come this day. They had a free day where it is not a Sabbath, it's in between two Sabbaths. They could have come and anointed Jesus on that day, and I can't work that out. I don't know why the women wouldn't have come on that particular day, on that Friday, Nisan 16, in this understanding, why the women wouldn't have come then. I also, with the Friday, I cannot understand why anybody could understand it with the Friday, why you would ignore the nights. So those are my issues with Friday, and that's my issue with the Wednesday understanding. With the way that I understand it, I think that it answers those two questions, or those two problems. I think it resolves those two problems. They can't come in between the two Sabbaths, because the women can't come because the two Sabbaths are one straight after another. So they have to observe those two Sabbaths. And so they don't come to anoint Jesus in the middle of those two Sabbaths, because they're conjoined together. So I think that solves that. And I also think that the 3 days and 3 nights cannot be ignored, and the only way to not ignore them is to include them. And when you include that third night, you lose Friday. Friday becomes impossible. So it's after Passover, because Messiah ate the Passover. The Passover ate the Messiah ate the Passover, and I have that. For me, that I have that on Wednesday, and not on the Tuesday, which is why I have Jesus dying on the Thursday. I understand that if he died on the Wednesday, then the Passover would have to be the Tuesday. So I understand that. But I still don't understand it in that way. Yeshua was taken Tuesday night, crucified Wednesday morning, which isn't counted because it was already 3 p.m. Wednesday night starts. Well, Wednesday does count, because Jews have a thing called Jewish reckoning, which means that any part of a day is included in a day. So if he died at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, Wednesday is day one. That becomes day one, as I showed in that would be my problem. That becomes day one. He died there, so that is day one. Then we have the night one, then day two, night two, day three, night three. And I still, on the Wednesday, even if he rises on the Sabbath, I still think that that's day 4. You see, I still think that becomes day 4. When was Christ born? If you want the year, I think it was 1 BC, but it could be 3 BC. But I think that it's 1 BC that he was born. Obviously, we don't know the exact time of the year, but I think it was 1 BC that he was born. If he was baptized at the age of 30 in 27 AD because of the rulers at that time mention a year. Yeah, it could be 27 AD, although he mentions the 27th year of type. This is slightly going off of topic, but let me bring that up. Add to streams. Let's. So in Luke. So I did this study because I did the problem with the Quirinius contradiction. So I've actually done that for my book, which is still on its way to being done. So yeah, it comes in. No, not you wouldn't go one and then 0. It would be 1 BC, 1 BC, then 1 AD. There's no 0, so it goes 1 BC, 1 AD. So yeah, I mean, it's around about that kind of time, isn't it? It's some have it as 3, even as far back as 4. So like literally as far back as 4th. So yeah, now in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius. So we need to figure out when Tiberius reigned, and then you just work out the 15th year of that, and then you'd be able to so this is John coming and preaching. Then you would obviously also have to figure out how long John was preaching for before Jesus arrived to him. And so all of this needs to be kind of figured out in order to be able to figure out kind of the time when Jesus was born. But yeah, I still, like I say, I still think that we're dealing with a Thursday crucifixion and a Sunday resurrection. I don't think Friday works on the basis of the nights, and I don't think that Wednesday works on the basis of the days. I can figure out both, and I could accept both, and if it was right, if either one of those was right, I would not have a problem with it, because I think that you can in some way you can work with the scripture, because it's really the scripture that's stopping me say Friday is specifically it's the 3 days and 3 nights. So that stops me from saying Friday. I do have a problem with the 2 Sabbaths that Matthew refers to, and I can't work out why Matthew would use Sabbaths plural if they were both on the same day. If the high Sabbath and the weekly Sabbath happen to be on the weekly Sabbath, I don't think that Matthew would use plural. I think that that's a bit strange. And when it comes to the Wednesday, I have the problem, obviously, with the women not being able to come or not coming in between. But I also have a problem with the Jewish reckoning. I'm less worried about the Jewish reckoning. I mean, if you remove the Jewish reckoning, and so Wednesday doesn't count, then Wednesday now can kind of work. If you now then remove the the verse that says that Jesus rose on the first day of the week. So I think that there's a lot with Friday and Wednesday. There's a lot of hoop jumping having to be done in order to try and make it fit. And you have to ignore one verse. You have to manipulate another verse. You have to ignore certain things or condense them to get. I just think that there's too much hoop jumping needing to be done, which it doesn't need to be done. You can fit all of that correctly if you have Jesus just die on a Thursday. It's much easier to just say that all the scriptures are as they are, and Jesus died on a Thursday, and then that removes all of the problems. You don't have to deal with any problems. There are no problems anymore. The 3 days, 3 nights work perfectly. You don't have to understand Mark 16:9 in a different way. You just read it as it reads in the English translation. You don't have to worry about the fact that Jewish reckoning, because you've included that in the Thursday. So you've removed the women not having been able to come to the sepulchre because they can't. So I just think that if Wednesday is the day that Jesus died, you have to manipulate some texts, or you need to kind of answer it in a different way. And also the same with Friday. But like I say, it's what people believe, and if you're convinced by a Friday or you're convinced by a Wednesday, and you don't see the issues that I see, then obviously you can accept Friday as the day that Jesus died, or you can accept Wednesday. I literally don't think that it's a salvation issue. I think that the only problem comes into it, and the reason why I've done the study is because I think that it is used against me when I talk to Muslims or atheists to say that there are problems and errors in the Bible, and Muslims and atheists and Jews and other non-Christians are able to look at that and use that against me because clearly they can see 3 days and 3 nights, and then I now need to say, well, no, it doesn't mean 3 days and 3 nights. It actually just means 3 days. Or I have to then, in order for it to be Friday to Sunday. So for me, I don't need to do that. I can just say, well, he didn't die on a Friday. The 3 days and 3 nights quite perfectly align with Thursday. Now, maybe I'm just doing that for ease rather than having to create my, create answers. I just think that the Thursday perfectly aligns with all 4 Gospels and the Scriptures, and so I'm able to have a much more confident understanding when I'm speaking to a Muslim or speaking to a Jew, speaking to a non-Christian who tells me there are contradictions in the Bible, there are errors in the Bible. How do you get 3 days, 3 nights into the into Friday to Saturday? And you say to them, okay, well, it's only literally 3 days. No, the Bible says 3 days, 3 nights. Why are you ignoring 3 nights? And so I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to argue that. I've incorporated the 3 days and 3 nights into my understanding. So, but like I say, that's my way of understanding Scripture, and I'm not going to stop somebody else from believing in a Friday. If you believe in a Friday, all I've done is provided the evidence that I think supports Thursday and disproves Friday and disproves Wednesday. At the end of it, you've got to make up your own mind and what you're convinced with and what you feel comfortable in being able to defend, because it's your belief. It's not my belief. It's your belief. And if you're comfortable with that and you're able to defend that belief, if that ever comes up, maybe it doesn't. Fortnite, yeah. So yeah, we still use Fortnite. 2 weeks. We use Fortnite in from where I'm from, in a much more it's much more used now. Whether that is how English that is, as far as I know, the whole of England uses Fortnite. It's not just a colloquial side to my. It's not just colloquial to where I live. I think it's the whole of England would use Fortnite. Yeah, I use Fortnite. I'll see you in a fortnight, or I'm going on holiday. How long are you going for? A fortnight. You going for a week or a fortnight? It's 2 weeks. It just means 2 weeks, 14 days, 14 nights. Basically, is what a fortnight means. It's just shortened to fortnight. Yeah, so yeah, it is used, and I use it more than 2 weeks. Yeah, thank you very much, Lion Farm. I'm glad you enjoyed. Like I say, we're all trying to do our best. I'm just presenting the arguments that I feel that works the best. I hope you see this. That was a comment meant to another person in the comments. It's a hard question. You don't need to answer when the exact year or because it was require another video to show. Yeah, it is. It's that is a difficult one. I think that I worked out that Jesus was born on 1 BC. That was the only way that the contradiction between Quirinius, between Luke and Matthew, with the flight to Egypt, and no, it's not the flight to Egypt, is it? That's another contradiction. It's the Quirinius contradiction. Yeah. So yeah, I worked that out as 1 BC, but yeah, maybe I'll show that why I do that. So it says 14 nights, but the days obviously are included. That's why my solution is that the 3 nights are parts of 3 24-hour periods. Yeah, but that the problem with that is that yes, it does include the days and nights. It's 14 nights, but we don't say. We don't say it in that sense. This is that is a modern understanding. So we're talking about what the Bible, the biblical language, it uses, not a modern day English understanding of what 14 nights would be. So yeah, because when you go on holiday, you pay for. I know you pay for the hotel during, like, if you, like, let's say you go on holiday to a hotel for the 14 nights, you're paying for the night. You're actually really paying for the nighttime where you're going to sleep. So we say nights in that sense, but that is a modern day understanding. I don't think that you can kind of condense them. You can understand that in the same understanding. That would be, yeah. Consider when the day starts. Okay, so in my understanding, that the day starts at the evening, as per Genesis. But I'm more than open to listening to why it wouldn't start in the evening, even though that's how the Jews still understand it today. Now, I'm not saying that that's correct, and I'm not saying my understanding is correct. That's how I've always understood a Jewish day to be. Now, like I say, I'm open to being shown why it wouldn't be that way, but the Genesis account says that God created the evening and the morning was the first day, and then the evening and the morning the second day. So that's how I understand it. That's how Jews understand it. But I'm not saying that that's correct. I'm just saying that that's how I understand it, because that's how it is. And maybe that is incorrect. And I'm open to being shown that that's incorrect. But that's like I say, that's how I understand it. But yeah, I think, well, maybe Lion Farm is maybe he's saying that the day didn't start at that. I'm not sure. Because he says up here, because it's because days don't really start at evening. So maybe that's something that maybe Lion Farm can explain and show us why that wouldn't be. I understand it to be. Because Sunday is day one, but that's working on a Roman time frame where day starts at midnight and runs through to midnight. So Sunday, the whole Sunday, is for the Roman time is day one, but they don't. The Jews don't run by a Roman time that we have. They don't run by the same clock as what we do, 12 till 12. That's not how the Jewish understanding of a day is. So, while we work that way, Sunday that would be day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, Thursday, day 5. There, even Jews today, they observe the Sabbath from Friday evening sundown until Saturday evening sundown. That's how the Jewish Sabbath is observed by Jews. They don't observe Saturday. Yeah, the next day is eventide. So it's the evening starts the new day. That literally states how I understand it. Acts 4:3. Yeah, that is literally giving us that the next day is the evening. Right, and they laid hands on them and put them in hold unto the next day, for it was now eventide. Okay. This isn't so what you have to understand in this verse is who's it being written to, and what we're meaning by the next day and eventide. Because if this is writing at Roman time, well, Romans have they have the same time frame as what we do, 12 till 12. So you'd have to go back and have a look at the understanding of this verse and what was referring to, and when they were released, when they were put inside, because the eventide is, for me, is the start of another day. So the start of the next day was the eventide, and they were held until the next day. So they were held for a whole day. That would be my understanding of that. We have to go back, and you have to explain. You would have to explain where God literally states, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So you'd have to explain how that isn't the way in order to view a day, evening and morning, because you also have in as I showed, where it says about the Passover meal, it says that the Passover meal was to be observed on the 14th, right, at even. Right, and it's the start of the day. And that's when the Passover meal was to be eaten overnight. So I'm not sure that shows us that that this could possibly show us that this was Roman time, that this was being written in Roman time, if you go back and have a look at it in a bit more detail. Right, okay, so early in the morning after the Sabbath was Saturday evening. Right, okay, so we have the morning. So I don't think that it can be the evening part, because the evening part would be, so it's early in the morning. So as we have the morning and the evening, right? So the morning is after the sunrise, that's what I would understand. That's how I'm reading that. That's how I understand that. So I can't read that in any other way. After the Sabbath happened, then you have early in the morning. So I can only see that as being Sunday at the after, or at the rising of the sun. And because included in early in the morning, we do, the word early there is proi, which is literally at the rise, is dawn. That's what proi means. All right. So what verse do we need? Let me see if I can bring it up. Is it in Matthew? Which verse is that in? See, it's got, as it began to dawn. Let's have a look. The first day of the week in Matthew 28:1. It's like at dawn, the dawn. And so this one is, this word here just means to shine, to dawn is like the verb. But then when you go into the same, is it in Matthew, Mark, Luke? I'm not sure if it's in Luke. So early in the morning, however, first day of the week, early, very early. So it's in the depths of the early morning. So they're all using different words. When the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, they came, very early in the morning. Early is the word proi. Early in the morning, at dawn. And that's what in Mark 16:9, you also get that word proi when it says, having risen now early, the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary. Right? I can't read that in any other way. I can't read that having risen now. Right? Early first day of the week, he appeared to Mary. So I can't put that comma there. Having risen now. Early first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary. That doesn't make a grammatical sense. It just seems a bit forced. But early again is proi, is the early in the morning at dawn. So whatever Mark 16:9 is referring to, whether it's just that's when he appeared to them, or whether he rose, which I think that is saying that he rose early, you're literally getting the word proi, early, which is at dawn. I read that, and as I say, I don't know if it's just the KJV. I don't think it is, but so when Jesus rose early on International Version, so when Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, comma, after Jesus rose from the dead early on Sunday morning, the New Living Translation. Now, when he rose early on the first day of the week, ESV. So all of these are kind of supporting what I would understand that Jesus rose on the first day of the week. Aramaic Bible has it, but at dawn, on the first day of the week, he arose and appeared. So he has those in the same way as what I kind of have it. I have it. The Aramaic Bible does have it in the same way as me. Is my internet going? It's actually stayed tonight for most of it, but it is saying that it's unstable. But hopefully you can still hear me. But yeah, this Aramaic version has it in the same way as what I have it, whereas that rising and them coming to the sepulchre kind of happens at the same time. And so it literally states there, but at dawn on the first day of the week, he arose and appeared. So so that's now the Net Bible does have it early on the first day of the week. After he arose, he appeared first. So that kind of doesn't support what I say. The Young's Literal has it. They understand this of the Sabbaths because they've got the first of the Sabbaths, and he having risen in the morning of the first of the Sabbaths, because they've understood what that means. Yeah. I don't understand it in any other way apart from the way that I've kind of stated it in that way. Yeah, that's just like literally how I read it. When I put all of the scriptures together, when I take Matthew's account that there are two Sabbaths, when I take the account of John that there was the high Sabbath, when I take Luke that he says that there was the preparation Sabbath, but there was also the indeed Sabbath of the commandment, when we take the fact that Mark says that that Jesus rose on the first day of the week at the rising of the sun at dawn, the women coming after, the fact that they don't come in the middle of the week on that 16th of Nisan, because the two Sabbaths are together. When we take into account that Jesus says that he would be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, when only by taking all of that information, and I've not ignored any of that, I've not had to explain away any of it. I think that when you utilize all of that those scriptures, all of that information, the only way that this can work is if he died on a Thursday and that he rose on the Sunday. But like I say, that is still my understanding. The writing is going to be on my website. I did link it into there. I will put it in again. So that is the link to my website, to this particular writing, so you can go through and study it properly and have another look. It is complicated. I fully understand that there's a lot of information. You have to understand the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, what the Passover is, that's a day of unleavened bread, but it's not the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and that directly after the Passover, which is a day of unleavened bread, becomes the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and that the Passover isn't a Sabbath, but the first day of unleavened bread is a Sabbath, and that the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a Sabbath as well, and that there's 2 Sabbaths in the week. It's complicated, and I can see why it can be confusing. But I still think that without ignoring any scripture, Thursday perfectly answers the question of when Jesus died. I know that I've been going for like 3 hours, over 3.25 hours, and I do appreciate every single one of you that has been around for that time, whether you've been in and out. I do appreciate. It's been a long study, and like I say, I do appreciate everybody that has been here. I know, Dennis, it is going to be coming on to 1 o'clock for you. So I appreciate that you've stayed up and interacted and asked your questions. I hope that I've been able to kind of like give you my reasons, my answers. Yeah, that's the whole point of this. I want questions. I don't think I'm kind of infallible or anything. I'm not immune to questions just because I've studied, and I'm not immune to being wrong either. I'm always right. I must point that out. When I've studied, I'm always right, and you just have to accept that. But I am not immune to being wrong. I just never am when I've found the answer. But that's it's good. I like the fact that you get your questions, because it's actually through the questions that I write my writings, because I have to, when somebody challenges me with something and it's something that I haven't maybe thought about before, or I need to explain in a better way, then I can go back and I can look at the writings. And what I do with all my videos is that I look through the writings or the questions and my answers, and I go, well, did I answer that correctly? Did I answer that in a way that they can understand? Is my writing as clear as what it should be? I think that this study could be cleaned up. I need to go and really look back through this study, because there were bits here that shouldn't have been taken here, and I shouldn't have gone into something that I went into. So this study can definitely be cleared up. And on my writing, I will definitely do that, because I don't think it flowed as well as what I would have liked it to have flown. But you can't tell until you do the video. That's the problem. Until I can sit there and read it all to myself, but it sounds okay when you're reading it to yourself. But then when you're reading out loud and you can see that, do you know what? I've just jumped from one argument into another one, and I didn't finish the argument that I was trying to put forward. And while it might flow in my writing, when I'm actually doing the study and I'm putting all of this and I'm going through this, and doing it from the slides, then maybe the slides are maybe slightly out of order or something. So yeah, but questions are brilliant. I love the questions, and I'm sure that I'm going to get questions. I like I say, I want to do the open study. So I'm going to do open study on Sunday, where I'm not going to have a specific topic. Now, if people don't ask questions, I'm just going to preach. I'm going to find something to. I'll already have something that I'm going to have on backup, in order to start doing some study myself, and teaching. But if there's any questions, I'm going to go through them and I'm going to answer the questions. And if I can't answer it, then what I'll do is I'll see if somebody else knows the answer, or whether we can figure the answer out. Maybe it's something I haven't studied before. I haven't studied everything. Of course I haven't. Anybody says that they've studied every part of the Bible is crazy. There's so much to study that it's impossible. It's impossible for one person to study everything and to have truth on everything. And so there are going to be times when I just go, I don't know the answer to that. But that's why when I get my next writing, because I'll say, right, okay, well, I don't know the answer to that right now, but do I need to know the answer to that? Is that a good question for me to answer? Is that something that my audience or my readers or would be interested in if I answered that? So let's go and have a look and see whether I can answer that question. And then I will, I'll try and answer it. I'll try and do a study on that. And, then maybe do a writing on that, and then maybe do a video. And so even in that particular time, I can't answer the question, but I will be able to answer it in the future. He has made everything beautiful in his name. Also, he has set the world in their heart, so that no man can find out the work that God makes from the beginning to the end. No, it's impossible. It is to find everything out. We do our best. We study. That's the enjoyable part, is we're trying to find answers to our questions. I've been challenged recently with some of the things that I've seen and watched with people who are non-Christians, who are coming up with arguments against the faith and why I shouldn't believe in what I believe. Some of the channels, in fact, actually, what I will do as a backup, if people don't have questions for me on that day, I'm going to go through some of the websites and the YouTube channels that I watch and I read, in order to kind of get information from, but also get questions from. So there are people that I watch that I disagree with, and I'm searching for things that they're bringing up in order to answer and to say, right, okay, well, I disagree with that, and this is why. Because I don't think that because there are people that are arguing with me. It's a lot of Hebrew Israelites specifically. They're arguing with me, and maybe they bring something up that I haven't actually looked at yet. But a lot of their arguments are just pseudo arguments. They're terrible. But it is a fast growing. I think that it's one of the fastest growing religions in America. Certainly in obviously the areas where where they're specifically the Black Americans who are being caught up with this understanding, this belief, and they're getting pulled away even from the Christian churches, the Christian faith, into this Hebrew Israelite doctrine, and being totally swept away from Jesus, because they won't even allow the name Jesus to be used. I mean, whenever they use the name Jesus, it's always in the sense of, they say, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus, and that's how they refer to him. So there's some that we call him the Mashiach, HaMashiach, Yeshua, Yehoshua. So there's different names for how Yeshua, how his name is actually pronounced. So they don't all agree on that, but what they all agree on is that Jesus is not his name, and that you cannot use the name Jesus, and that Jesus is the white man's religion. So yeah, I do deal with them quite a bit, and I try to answer all their arguments, and they could be quite interesting. Yeah, I know the camps are smaller than many think, and I know that they're not as, but it is growing. It's definitely a growing it's a growing thing over there. And we have them now in England. We have Hebrew Israelites in England as well, that sound exactly the same, but just have an English accent. They say the same things. But we do have the British Israelites as well, which are white, which say that only white people can be saved. And they basically have a completely different, they have the same as the Hebrew Israelites, but the reverse. So only white people can be saved, and that only white people are Israelites. So both are as wrong as one another. You can't fight racism with racism. That's not the way to do it. You can only fight evil, because racism. Let's get it right. Racism is evil, and you can only fight racism with good. You can only fight evil with good. Good overcomes evil. So you can't fight evil with evil. So, somebody stabs you, you stab them back, you both die. That's not the way to win. You overcome. Okay, right. I'm gonna finish it there. Thank you very much for everybody for watching. Do appreciate everybody watching along. It has been complicated. I do apologize that I may have probably made this more complicated than it should have been, even though it is complicated already. But I think I jumped about a little bit and maybe didn't quite put the verses together as much as I possibly could. But let me just see this. Salam Farm, but the British Israelites in whom these standards of thoughts are forcefully allied remain familiar for the Protestant Church, a movement to which he belongs, has claimed membership of 2 million and has branches in all Ireland. Okay. Yeah. First published online August 8th. British Israel. All authors and I have to look into that. But yeah, there are some things going out. Can you do a live on the 1054 the 54C Great Schism one day? I'd have to do a far deeper study than what I have. in order to be able to do that. It might be something that you might have studied a lot more, and maybe you've done one a live on that, or and if you have, you can put a link to your live on that. I'd have to look into that a little bit more. I don't think that I've really studied that in any great detail, so it wouldn't be something live that I could do right off, because I would need to study it, and I'd have to see the relevance of it, in the sense of, like, would it be worth my while? How big a deal would it be in order to do a full study on that and then do a live? Is it worth my? Not saying that it's not, that nothing's not worth studying, but how is there something more important than that I should be doing? But you'll enjoy the story being, and I have no, yeah, I'll have a look. I will have a quick look, proper look, and see if I can remember what it is, and whether it's something that I'm going to do a study on. I'll look into that. I will. But as of now, it's now just gone past midnight. I'm going to leave it there. It is 3.5 hours of study. I appreciate everybody that's been here, especially those that have stayed here for the full 3.5 hours. And it has been a awkward jumping about study and lots of information about things that you need to be able to understand in order to figure this out. But definitely study the Passover, study the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because that you need that in order to be able to correctly come to the answer, or be able to, I say correctly be able to come to the answer, but be able to work through the answer in a way that allows you to be able to put all the information together. So you need all the information, and you need to understand that the Passover is called the preparation because it is the preparation for the next day, which is a Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a high Passover. So that's fundamental to understanding this. But yeah, thank you very much for being here. I'm going to go live again on Sunday. It is going to be an open day, so people can come on and they can ask questions, and we can look into kind of anything theology, but it doesn't necessarily have to be theological. But we'll go through and see what we can work out. But thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday on my next study. Oh, before you go, please give this a thumbs up, and also subscribe if you haven't already, because it will keep you up to date with videos, and it'll automatically send out a message if you signed up to messages for YouTube to let you know that I've gone live. But again, thank you very much.